War Eagle Auburn family and E2C Network family, we appreciate you tuning in to another edition of E2C Network Live. It is Thursday night during football season, and most of you know what that means. It is preview night. We look ahead to the next game on the schedule. This time in week, what is this now, 7 for us? We are playing the Ole Miss Rebels. It is a conference rival, a division rival, a game that's usually interesting every single year. And there's more connective tissue between Auburn and Ole Miss than I think both sides would like to admit, coaches and such. We'll probably hit on a lot of those different topics tonight. We do have a special guest with us, which I'll introduce in just a second. I do want to take care of our boilerplate stuff at the beginning, though. As you come into the stream, please do make sure that you smash that like button here on YouTube. If you're watching on Twitter, Facebook, you can do something similar there. Retweet, share it out, invite a friend in to be part of the show here. And right now, use this as your check-in period, as so many of you are already doing. Post where you're watching from with your city, your state, if you're international. And if you are a Ole Miss Rebel fan, you can even put in whatever you guys say. Hotty toddy, I guess. But we say War Eagle here. So let me know who's here into the chat during the check-in period. Questions throughout the night as they are appropriate. Be on your best behavior, folks. We've got guests here. Either way, I'm excited tonight to talk about the Ole Miss Rebels, and to do that, I brought in a special guest, part of an a SEC super fan group on Twitter that we have. This is Jason, known as Vegas Rebs, I believe is what you're better known as in the chat. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you so much, Kyle, for having me. I appreciate the chance to be here. Follow me on Twitter at Vegas Rebs. It's always your boy. And definitely, like I said, excited to put a name to a face and talk about some football.
I am as well. So we got to start off with the very first thing.
Oh, sorry, you froze up on me there.
Well, I said a joke and now it didn't land. So no. that's just perfect timing on my part. I said, thank you for warming up our next head coach and getting him ready for us, because I'm sure you've heard that a lot.
Oh yeah, very much so. I think it's funny. I've been noticing ever since Lane Kiffin came on, like clockwork, Mississippi State fans have been like, oh, Lane's going to leave y'all in 2 years. He's not even going to be there. Then last year, Tennessee fans were like, oh, I can't wait till Lane leaves y'all, because we went down there in Knoxville and beat them. So I can't wait till Lane leaves y'all. And now this year it's Auburn. So we've got three different SEC fan bases who are fervently praying that Lane Kiffin leaves Ole Miss. And I just cannot get a bigger kick out of that.
That's a good perspective to have, because I hope that you can take that in stride. I say that in complete jest. Now, listen, if Tommy Tuberville can say he's not leaving in a pine box, then anything can happen, right? So if Lane does decide that he wants to come to Auburn someday, then I will have to accept him as our head coach. And I will tell you this, regardless of coaching changes and not, I do appreciate the level of frustration that Lane gives Nick Saban. He is a thorn in that little elf man's side, and I do love that about him, and I'm sure you guys appreciate that as well.
Absolutely, and I think, for what it's worth, I think Auburn makes a ton of sense as a landing spot for Lane Kiffin eventually. I think the only other spot that makes a little more sense is maybe Alabama. Maybe they look at him after Saban leaves, but I think he'd fit great down in Auburn. And if he leaves Ole Miss after, we're I think 17-3 or 18-2 in our last 20 games. If he leaves us for at least a comparable SEC program, he's done his job here, right? And we're looking at a second straight year going to a New Year's Six bowl game, hopefully, if everything breaks out even. So if he does leave for a better job, he did his job here, right?
Yeah.
He came here, he won early, and that's what coaches do. That's what good coaches do.
So do you, just on that note, it's an interesting thing that you bring up. And it's not that I have a ton of Ole Miss Rebel fans to talk to. So I want to ask this question. It sounds to me, based on what you're saying, that you're kind of comfortable with Ole Miss being, at least to some degree, like a landing place for coaches to move on to the next thing. Is that what I'm hearing there? Or
Yeah, I think you have to kind of look at the reality of the situation that Ole Miss is in. We are not a historically relevant SEC program. We're working on it.
Okay.
And I think, we're one of, I think, 7 or 8 different programs that have 3 New Year's Six bowl appearances since the New Year's Six and the college football playoff was instituted. So we're working on becoming, a nationally relevant program. But you've got guys like a Hugh Freeze, who I think if he did stay here and wasn't, didn't resign, would have eventually left for a Texas or, a bigger program. I think right now, situations like Ole Miss are kind of that that springboard to a bigger job. Now, do I want that to be the case? No, I would love to be a destination job, right? But I think realistically, right now, you can't say that Ole Miss is a destination job.
Listen, I respect that a whole lot. Someone that can understand the situation, because I've never felt that way about Ole Miss, but I don't have the insider's perspective to really, honestly speak about that and not it seem like I'm just trying to take a dig at the opposition. I obviously view Auburn as a destination place to some degree. Now, I've always said that Auburn, a coach needs to want to be here, because you could find that scenario where they want to move on to something else. So that's why I always stress that whoever's here, they need to be an Auburn guy, have some Auburn tie, things like that. No, it's not always necessarily the case. Obviously within the vein of what's going on with Brian Harsin right now, that seems to be kind of sticking to that storyline. But we've had success stories with Pat Dye, who is a Bama guy and came here and became the quintessential Auburn man. And he's who we look to now. Now, our godfather is Shug Jordan, but that Pat Dye is the more modern version of that great patriarchy of Auburn men, Auburn football, and what we latch on to a lot. Switching more over to the game and just, the overall preview of this. We had Rob bring it up a little bit earlier in the chat that he's heading your way right now. The legend persists of the Grove at Oxford. Give me some perspective of what Auburn fans, even if whether you have or not, I don't know. I'm assuming you've been to the Grove. Give me some perspective on what Auburn fans heading to Oxford for the first time, or even maybe if they've frequented before, what are they going to see when they come to town?
You are going to see something that you have never seen before in your life. You're going to see 10 acres of the zenith of tailgating. I mean, this is, and again, I say this as an Ole Miss transplant, right? I did not grow up in the South, as you can tell. I moved out there for law school and fell in love with it. Didn't really have any exposure to college football prime, as it were. I was a UNLV fan growing up, and you can kind of guess how my exposure to college football went, being a UNLV fan. But the Grove is absolutely, it lives up to the hype. Okay, I will say this isn't just something where Ole Miss fans are sticking a feather in their cap and saying this just to say it. The national media agrees. You will find fans of all stripes saying that the Grove is phenomenal. Now, being myself, I do not drink, right?
There's a great question right there.
Oh, yeah, there we go. So I do not drink. I'm a Mormon, as it were. But it is still worth it to go because, A, it is gorgeous. And I don't just mean the architecture, right? You are right now in prime season for people watching at the Grove. There's also fantastic food. Now, a lot of hay gets made about, oh, well, y'all can't grill, y'all can't have open flames. That's fine. You put some chicken tenders in a sterno or something like that, you've got it warm all day. You will have people set up there with direct TV and satellite in their tents so you can watch the game before you go to the game. It is absolutely phenomenal. I love the Grove. Now, I will say, flip side of that, I think sometimes we put too much emphasis on it, right? Okay. I would love to see the fans say, okay, it's time to go to the game now and make the half-mile walk or the quarter-mile walk to the Grove, or from the Grove to the stadium, stay for 60, and then go back. That'd be fantastic. Sometimes I think we do put too much emphasis on winning the party than winning the game, but the Grove is a phenomenal place to go prior to the game.
Yeah, I've heard the legends of it. To me, and I think, yes, tailgating is synonymous with, people getting drunk and stuff like that. That's just, that's how it is at Auburn, everywhere. Have you been to Baton Rouge? They get lit up there. I myself do not for personal reasons, but I enjoy the tailgate atmosphere. So to go experience that someday is something that's on my bucket list. I want to visit Vaught Hemingway. I want to visit, all the other SEC schools I haven't been to. But you think of those quintessential things that everybody's heard of. For Auburn, it's Tiger Walk and the Eagle Flight. Those are the big things to think of. For you guys, it's the Grove. Everybody else has got a Tiger Walk. It seems like these days. Just remember, we did it first. I don't actually know if that's true. I don't know if it's true, but we do it the best, especially when times are a little bit more favorable for the Tigers. Right now, I would say Tiger Walk's probably got pretty slim these days, but you can imagine. You said that you guys put a lot of emphasis, maybe too much, on the Grove. I'm glad that you guys have that thing that you latch onto, because I think that's what made college football great. When we latch onto these traditions and really make it our own. So I don't think it's anything to be ashamed about that you guys. Now, I would like to see some of the fans get into the stadium a little bit earlier, and I'm sure Lane would too.
He's been very vocal about that. Absolutely. He wants us to come early, stay late, and then go to the Grove, right? That's the thing, is the Grove's always going to be there. The game's only there for 60 minutes. You can take 3 hours out of your day, sit there, watch the game, and then go get drunk. That's completely fine. Hell, go get drunk at home. That works too.
Hey, listen, I think that's what the majority of Auburn fans are doing this day anyway. So I will not be able to travel to Oxford this go around, but the great thing about us being in the SEC West together is that we come around every 2 years, not like the stupid cross-divisional stuff where we only see each other every 6 years right now and each other's place every 12 years. That will even change, who knows, with the advent of Oklahoma and Texas joining up, and who knows who else about how this thing's going. So eventually I hope to check that box for Vaught Hemingway, for the Grove, and just the rest of the campus. We did have maybe not so much. I guess it can involve campus too. Let me find it right here. Jason, what's your favorite places to eat? City Grocery and Tallahatchie? Are those places that you know about?
I've never been to the Tallahatchie. I think it may have even opened up after I left. I've been back to Oxford only a couple of times since I graduated law school back in 2014. City Grocery is phenomenal. A buddy of mine, Butch, runs the catering side of that, and so he's always out and making food for campus events. The most slept upon spot in Oxford is Handy Andy Grocery. So it's a little place on North Lamar. It's right next door to a great Greek restaurant called Volta. But Handy Andy has hands down the best hamburger I've ever had in my life, and I know my burgers. Okay, you can see I am no stranger to a hamburger and sides. So a lot of people will try and sell you on Handy Andy's barbecue. It's good, not great, but the jumbo cheeseburger is elite. I would absolutely go there. Then you've got your county spots like Ajax, Bore, those spots on the square. Oxford is a tremendously underrated food location. There's great food no matter where you go. We've got chicken tenders that are sold at the gas station, chicken on a stick, that Eli Manning will tell you is the best food he's ever had, right? So there's just great food everywhere. But if I had to nail it down to just one great place, I'm going to Handy Andy.
Okay. Those are good recommendations to have. I have always associated all the Southeast and the SEC schools with great food. I mean, was it Marty and McGee on SEC Nation? I think they do a whole, or somebody there does the whole spiel about going around and trying different foods, not necessarily at those well-known places, but the hole-in-the-wall places.
Yeah.
So that's, it's a great thing for people to know that may be heading down there. And I guess that's why Rob had asked that a little bit earlier. Rob, it seems like Rob, one of our listeners, gets to travel around a lot to these games. I'm kind of jealous of him. I do not have that kind of clout or that type of funds to do that. So I sit here in my little bubble in my studio.
It's a nice studio, though. You got a nice camera and a nice mic. So there are worse places to be.
It's grown over the last couple of years or so. I mean, it used to be me over a little headset mic and in a little dark corner over there, but it's still ever growing and changing. I enjoy it, but I love being in college football atmospheres. Like, people don't get that about me, most people. Like, I would rather be in the middle of it on campus and not go to the game and I've done this before, go watch it in the student center for Auburn, and to be back in my home. I just love being in game day. And I can imagine that Oxford, the Grove, Vaught Hemingway is just, just the same kind of thing. When you get in it, it's amazing. So like in the stadium, but kind of wrap up our discussion about what to prepare Auburn's for atmosphere wise, anything that they should know about Vaught Hemingway or your thoughts on the experience in there? Just what do you think?
So I have admittedly only been to Vaught Hemingway a handful of times. As a law school student, I didn't have a bunch of time. Football season is also synonymous with exam season in law school. So I didn't get to make a bunch of games. I will say they have worked very hard to update the concessions. So the concessions, from what I understand, are much better. Vaught Hemingway in its guts is not a great stadium. They are working on that. There's a renovation coming up. I think it's 50 million or 150 million, somewhere around that area, renovation that they're going to be doing. They're going to clear out all those guts. But it is not an elite stadium as far as moving around. I will say, if you're planning on leaving at halftime, do not. Everyone else does the same exact thing, and you're not going to move. You're going to take that 20 minutes just to get out. So go to the restroom early, get your food late. So the stadium itself is not elite. And I don't like to say that. I wish we had an elite stadium, but we don't.
Okay.
The experience, though, is fantastic. Yeah. We get there early. We lock the Vaught. They play "Come With Me" by Puff Daddy, the instrumental, and the entire stadium's locking arms and swaying. And that's fantastic. They do that, I think, 7 minutes before the game. We typically have a celebrity come out and do the first hottie toddy cheer. So they'll do the "Are you ready" chant. I think last home game, it was Chuck Norris.
Interesting.
We've had Betty White, we've had Hulk Hogan, we've had the kind of the gamut. If you can think of a celebrity, odds are they've done the "Are you ready" chant at some point. So it is a fun place to go. Don't go sit in the student section. There's a bunch of alcoholed up frat boys up there typically who like to fight each other.
We've seen the videos.
I remember I went out there for a BYU game. It was actually my first actual week in Oxford. Went there for the BYU game, and there were some more colorful comments thrown towards just religious folks in general, and had to kind of turn around and say, guys, we're on the same team here, right? Yeah, I'm wearing red and blue just like you guys. We don't have to make this that personal. So, alcohol and youth can kind of create some interesting things, but I will say for the most part, they're going to have a really enjoyable experience at VHS.
Oh yeah. And what it sounds like to me, obviously I'm not trying to put Gainesville or Ole Miss on the same playing field either way, saying one's better than the other. But when you describe it, it sounds a lot like, from my experience in Gainesville, I've said this before, the swamp, getting into it, through it, out of it, terrible, absolutely terrible. But when you're sitting in it and you're in your seat and kickoff's coming during the game, it's a great college football experience, like one of the best experiences I've had.
And a lot of it's going to depend too on the crowd, right? So the crowd, when there are a bunch of people there, the stadium is electric. If there's not a bunch of people there, it can be as quiet as a morgue. Yeah. Right. And I think that's one of the big things that Lane Kiffin, ever since he's been here, has been kind of stressing is, look, come early, stay late, be involved. Right. And you got a lot of that from Nick Saban, who kind of had the same issue with Alabama students 2-3 years ago, is, look, guys, if you're not, it's a home field advantage for a reason. We need you to be there, to be loud, to be riding the other team so that we can have that kind of 12th man effect. And really just for our team's sake, they want to play in front of people who are excited to see them play.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, obviously, the SEC stadiums are just known for their home field advantage across the board. And you want to see that represented, not just for a quarter, not just for a half, but for the entire game. So, but when you've got attractive things like the Grove, you kind of understand to some level why people go there. But at the same time, if I'm there for the football game, I am there for the football game. That is what I want to be just enthralled in. If I have the ticket, if I have the opportunity to be in there, let's talk a little bit of football, and let's start off with you, because obviously we talk Auburn nonstop here, and so for the benefit of the majority of our viewers, this is about getting to know Ole Miss and what to expect. Lane Kiffin and his, maybe not the personality, but the schemes, his identity for your team. How is that looking? Just your perspective of how he's leading the program right now and kind of where you're feeling with this season.
So this is, and it sounds funny to say for a team that's 6-0, this is a team that's still kind of finding its way, right? They have gotten to the point now. I think most people, at least most pundits, had Ole Miss at 6-0, 5-1 at this point in the season, just kind of by virtue of how easy the schedule has been, right? Kentucky was the first really good team that Ole Miss has played, and they won that game by 3 points against a gimpy and beat up Will Levis. So yeah, it's a fantastic game, right? And the defense, I think that's the biggest difference between where we were when Lane Kiffin came in and where we're at now is the defense. The defense has stepped up immensely. That is a very good defense, an SEC depth kind of defense, which is what he's been preaching since day one. But this is still very much a team that's trying to find its way, right? It's trying to find out what its identity is. Are we a running team? Are we a passing team? Jackson Dart has been the full starter now for 3 games, right? Up until that, it was a timeshare with Luke Altmaier, who came into the season as probably the likely QB1 just because of his time in the system and his experience. Jackson Dart hasn't even been on campus a full year yet, right? So he is still working on building that rapport with his receivers. He's still working on getting the system down. He reminds me of a very young Matt Corral, right? He's got this big arm. He's got the ability to pull the ball down and get out of the pocket, extend the play. And if you look at their stats, and not even the stats, but kind of the intangibles, right? How they lead the team, how they react to pressure. Go back and watch kind of freshman year Matt Corral, because Jackson Dart is still a freshman, right? He's still a freshman. And so go back and watch freshman year Matt Corral. He didn't make great reads. He made some brain, kind of head scratching throws. So I think with 2 years of tutelage at the very least with Lane Kiffin, he's going to develop into something really good. But yeah, to the general question, I think most Ole Miss fans are happy right now with where we're at, if not a little bit nervous, because we haven't really been tested. We haven't seen this Ole Miss team up against the ropes. I think the closest you get to that is either the Kentucky game or Vanderbilt had them down 13-3 going into the second quarter this last week and ended up winning that game. I think it's 52-28. So they made a great response in the second half. Now it's Vanderbilt, obviously, so you can't take a ton out of that. But holding them to 8 points in the second half was really admirable. So I think we're starting to see kind of the surface of what this Ole Miss team could be.
Yeah, let's Dustin even says here, Dart's improved the season, as improved as the season gone on, very impressive coaching. We'll come back to that. I don't want us to just leave that part of the conversation, but because he brought up this other point, are you familiar with Ladarius Tennyson and JJ Pegues, the former Auburn Tigers?
Yes, and they've both made significant contributions. I think we were kind of counting on that. More Pegues to the extent, but Tennyson has been fantastic too. He is 7th right now on the team in tackles, I believe. I can actually pull that up. Give me a second.
It sounds about right, because that's the type of production he was starting to get here.
Yeah, he's 7th on the team in tackles. He is tied for 3rd on the team in sacks. So, and to have that kind of production from him in that DB safety kind of hybrid spot we've got him in is fantastic. We needed that with some of the departures that we had. We didn't have great depth there. When he came in, I think everyone kind of thought, oh, cool, Tennyson, he's got SEC experience. At the very least, he knows what it is to play SEC football. He'll make a great depth piece. And he has shown up to be really one of the more dependable starters, I think, in a surprisingly now deep Ole Miss secondary. Pegues is fantastic. I think that kid is going to be a star. I do think that, I don't want to say he regrets not coming to Oxford out of high school. I know that we recruited him really heavily. He wanted to play a different role than I think eventually Auburn had him playing, and is now sold on being on the defensive side of the ball. That being said, this last week against Vanderbilt, we pulled him out and put him in the backfield, right? He was a lead blocker on one of our rushing plays. So I think you may see him get some offensive production here too. But much like Tennyson, he's been fantastic as far as depth goes on a defensive line that I think hasn't quite performed up to what we've wanted thus far. But he has gotten a lot of snaps. I think he actually is where is he on as far as total tackles goes? He's 18th on the team with regard to total tackles, but you'll take that kind of production out of a lineman.
Yeah, we definitely missed the two of them. Pegues was one of the fan favorites just because I called him Pegasus because he looks like a Pegasus. So he's like oddly beautiful. Like you look at the guy, the size, and he's oddly athletic. I'll never forget some of the little spin moves and him laying people out on blocks and stuff like that. And you're like, how does this man with this size do these things that he's doing? That's why he was a Pigs assist.
He pulled a hurdle on somebody, didn't he? I think
he did a lot of
hurdled
things.
Somebody.
He did a lot of things. So we regretted that we couldn't find what would kept him here to be happy, because we tried him across the board, and he had success, I think, in most of those areas, more in others. But if he's happy, that's the most important thing. I just, I wish success for him and for Tennyson, just not in this game. Just they want to kind of like just have an off game for this game. That's fine. Tennyson, I probably am more disappointed. And with the advent of transfer portal and the nature of just the way college football works now, you're not shocked that you lose a lot of people, especially with a tense situation that Auburn's been going through.
Sure.
But we were shocked by the Tennyson, I think, departure, because he was rising up and looking to be one of the leaders this year for Auburn. Mm-hmm. And when he decided to leave, we were like, whoa, what's going on here? So that, we obviously would love to have both of them back. But I think for me personally, if I'm just going to play favorites, Tennyson is definitely the one that I would love to have back, just in terms of, I think he's a big impact player. We're doing pretty well, surprisingly, on the defensive back front this year. It's actually probably the one unit that nobody's really questioned hardcore at that in the defensive line, which is really shocking, because if you remember last year, your rivals in the state torched us for, what was it? I forget how many unanswered points in the third and fourth quarter. And just like that. And we had a former head coach and a defensive backs focused defensive coordinator, Derek Mason, and just got embarrassed all season by that group. And it's like night and day difference. They're reliable. We don't have to worry about them not being competent. Nobody's perfect, but Tennyson definitely would have helped in that area. That's very full with athletes that we have right now, and very happy about that. Let's come back to Jackson Dart. Lived up to the hype? Yes, no?
I will say the jury's still out. I think if the Jackson Dart that we've gotten over the past 2 games is the Jackson Dart that we will get for the remainder of the season, has lived up to the hype. I think if he can kind of go on Matt Corral's career trajectory, which again would not surprise me if you go back and look at the stats then versus his stats then versus Jackson Dart's stats now, very similar kind of player, very similar kind of skill set. So I think you could see him surpass the hype, right? This is a kid who was, by most consensus, the number 2 transfer quarterback. Now, have the stats justified that? Probably not. And I think the Lane Kiffin will even tell you, hey, we would have loved for the quarterback timeshare to end in week 2, right? And that just didn't happen. So up until about week 4, we weren't sure who was playing where. Now, I think the plan was always to have Jackson Dart as the starter. Luke Altmaier at this point, I believe, is going to take his redshirt this season and then transfer out.
Right.
Would not surprise me a bit. He hasn't played a lick after game 3. So I think that's the writing on the wall kind of is there. So as far as living up to the hype, probably not, right? I think we're all kind of expecting the Jackson Dart from USC to come in. He makes some really confusing decisions every now and then with the throws. There was a Vanderbilt throw he had that was just head-scratchingly bad. Almost looked like he was trying to turf it and end up throwing it right to the defender there. But I think you're seeing a kid who's 19 years old playing in the SEC for the first time. Right. So I think the jury's still out on whether he's lived up to the hype. There are people out there going to tell you, no, he's a bust, he's a bum. I just think it's too early to make that pronouncement. Flip side, I think it's too early to say that he's going to be the next Matt Corral. I think it's too early to decide either way.
No, I think that's a very fair place to start from, and I wish more people would start from those type of places about opinions about things. Listen, he seems to be a guy with a lot of talent. It's a matter of getting used to what you're playing against, and that's the SEC. The Pac-12 is different than the SEC. Right now, 91 completions for 143 attempts, 1,358 yards, 8 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So that ratio probably could be a little bit better. Touchdowns to interceptions. Reminds me a lot of Bo Nix. By the way, I'm a huge Bo Nix fan, and we talked about missing players. We are the reasonable Auburn fans are missing Bo Nix, even if they won't admit it in person on social media. They know we would be a little bit better with Bo Nix here.
It's amazing how good playing a Pac-12 schedule will make a quarterback
look.
It
will, and it's also amazing what happens when you go to a team with an offensive line that's got it together somewhat, and that's really the story here. Like he is playing again. I don't shy away from that. He's playing in the Pac-12. There's a Jackson Darts over here, and that's why he's struggling a little bit more, getting used to the SEC. Mm-hmm. But you're also got an offensive line that's been together for a long time. And this group at Auburn has too, and they just can't get it figured out. But they've got it figured out. They're protecting him. They're making him feel comfortable to do what he wants to do. The flip side here, you've got any quarterback, doesn't matter if it's TJ Finley, who's reportedly still day-to-day. That was from the press conference this week. That to me tells me he will not be playing significantly, if any, this game. You've got Zach Calzada, who is going to be the heir apparent from Texas A&M amongst all the other transfers and quarterbacks this season. And he's out for the season because his shoulder never healed up rightly, which had nothing to do with Auburn or anything like that. Just never healed up rightly. And then you're down to either Robbie Ashford, who's not someone that you need to push aside. He's got a lot of talent. Some of your descriptions of Jackson Dart fit that, I think, with him. He's a guy that's learning to play in the SEC as not a true freshman, he'd be a redshirt freshman, and a guy that's being asked a lot of with not a lot of support at such a young age. You could see that it's interesting watching the dynamic between Bo Nix, who had a lot of experience, a lot of bad habits because of what he'd been through at Auburn, but he can make things happen a little bit more regularly because of that experience. What happens is, the question is, what happens when Robbie finally does get that experience, get used to what the cards he has to work with here at Auburn? What can he accomplish with his athleticism? And I think that's the big thing for Ole Miss and for any team really, is can you keep Robbie Ashford from doing the things that he's capable of doing? Georgia did. So I'm sure that your coaching staff has done that, looked at the Georgia tape of get pressure right up the middle. It's not that hard to do. and force him out to his right and make him choose to either throw it or to try to make something happen with his legs. And you make him one-dimensional. That's probably the game plan right now. So any worries about Robbie, about your defensive line defending him?
We have done a fairly good job this year as far as more mobile quarterbacks go. When we played against Vanderbilt, Mike Wright, who I think may lead the SEC right now in quarterback rushing yards, we bottled him up pretty well. That being said, the Vanderbilt ground game gashed us pretty well, right? Okay. So we do have some significant concerns, I think, for the middle of our defensive line against the standard rush. So I think the biggest concern that we have, not necessarily Robbie Ashford, but it's Tank Bigsby. Yeah. Right. To what extent are we going to be able to stop Tank Bigsby from running off, breaking out 5-6 yards per chunk, forcing us to bring those safeties down in the box. And then from there, Robbie Ashford decides to do what Robbie Ashford wants to do. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the biggest stress for us. I will say our pass rush has gotten better against teams with bad O-lines or porous O-lines. We are able to get and sustain some pressure. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see, maybe a spy assigned to Ashford for most plays. Maybe one of our linebackers or our nickelback, whatever, we're going to run that up in there. So that wouldn't surprise me at all to see. I'm not terribly concerned about Robbie Ashford's ability to throw the ball. I don't think he's really shown much, great arm talent, which again, to be expected out of a kid I don't think he was expecting to play quarterback this year. I think he was expecting, I'm going to be on the depth chart behind TJ Finley and Zach Calzada. I'm going to come in, I'm going to learn for a year, and maybe next year I make some noise in camp. So he's doing the best that he can in a situation that we probably wouldn't thrust most kids into.
Right.
I really like Robbie Ashford. I wanted him to come to Ole Miss. We wanted him to play baseball for us. We recruited him really heavily as a baseball and a football player. So I would have loved to have seen him here in Oxford. He unfortunately chose to go to Oregon and then come back to the SEC and avoid us again. So I would have loved to see him out here. But so I'm not necessarily all that concerned. And I think the coaching staff will pay some attention to him as a passer. But I think right now it's going to be, like you said, can we generate pressure? Can we get him to roll out? And he pretty exclusively rolls out to his right. So, is the left side of our defense going to be prepared for that?
Right.
I think that's what's going to be the big point of emphasis for him.
Yeah. And really, when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter if we're talking about Robbie, if we're talking about Tank, and our wide receivers, which have shown a lot of improvement this year when they've been given the opportunity to do so. It really, the question is offensive line. If y'all can create pressure, you're going to get to a young guy like Robbie. Here's something I always like to do in these shows is kind of make a prediction and see if you agree. If Tank Bigsby breaks 100 yards, do you think Ole Miss still wins the game?
I'm going to say no.
I would agree with that, because to me, that's not, even if it's just 100 yards, because the fact that right now this team is breaking 100 yards with one rusher, this offensive line, that shows that they got something right, which means it's indicative of the rest of the offense getting something right in the passing game, pass blocking. I really think it's as simple as that. If Auburn can establish Tank Bigsby, and it's not just that, and I think there's probably going to be some Auburn fans bringing this up here in a little bit, because we've known this for a season. The running back number 2, who really shouldn't be number 2, he's like 1B, and even that's probably a disservice to him. Jarquez Hunter is an athlete, just an athlete. I mean, he's been, he doesn't look the size of, JJ Pegues, but he can do spin moves, hurdles. He'll accelerate. Get the guy open space and just let him do. I'm sure you saw the play last week where he spun out of it and went down the sideline. So if Tank gets 100 yards, that means Jarquez probably had at least some successful day as well, which would bode success for Auburn. But I'll be honest with you, Jason. I'm not confident that can happen, even though you said that y'all were gashed at some points in the season. That is not I'm always very careful about how I talk about our players here, but I also try to be honest too. The offensive line has not produced, and they are seniors, 5th-year seniors, and I love them to death. They just can't get it right. So you should rest assured, as much as confidence I have, and if we break 100 yards with Tank, we win, I'm not certain that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I'd put a caveat on there too. I mean, we've had 6 games into the season, we've given up 100+ yards 4 times. And so in 4 out of those 6 games, 100+ yards rushing 4 teams. The most recent was Vanderbilt. We gave up 122, right? So it's not necessarily, hey, if you can run for 100 yards on this offense, you're going to win the game, because that could also mean that we've just completely stifled Robbie Ashford, and Tank Bigsby has 122 yards on 33 carries, right? So he could very well see a bulk of the work and still not do much, because the O-line's not giving Ashford any time. Yeah. To say 100 yards, does that mean an Ole Miss win or an Ole Miss loss? I don't know. I want to lean, yes, it would mean an Ole Miss loss, just because, like you said, if Bigsby's going for 100, Jarquez Hunter, who I would have crawled across broken glass to have him come to Ole Miss as a Mississippi kid. Jarquez Hunter, I think you've got to find some way to get him involved really heavily. There's a slot receiver or there's a scat back, get something in there. Because Ole Miss, the Achilles heel for this Ole Miss team has been rushing, right? The rushing defense has been kind of where they've been fairly leaky. That almost cost us the game against Kentucky. We couldn't stop Chris Rodriguez. I think Kentucky ran for something like 108 yards. Tulsa ran for 262, right? So you can run on this Ole Miss defense. The question is going to be, can the Auburn offense or Auburn defense stop Ole Miss? If this gets into a shootout, who does that favor?
That favors you guys. I will answer that right now. A shootout right now with this offense favors you guys. It is indicative of Auburn's defense to do what they've been asked to do a lot and have risen to the occasion. That the funny thing about it is last week's Georgia game, the Auburn fans know this, but since you're, obviously haven't been here a lot, we'll just reiterate it. That score is not indicative of the level of effort and stats even that were present for the defense early on in the game. I mean, they were holding a Georgia team, a Stetson Bennett guys. How long has he been there now? Like 12 years, it feels like at this point.
I think Stetson Bennett and I went to high school together, and I graduated in 2000. So I think we're going to that.
Right. So, an experienced guy, athletes across the board at Georgia right now, and the defense shows up and puts pressure on them and makes them look very, very uneasy. So I have full faith that the defense will show up. It's, can the offense give them the support they need? Because if it is a shootout, that very much favors you guys, because we have not shown outside of Mercer the ability to run down the field and score, We are good for that first quarter, that second quarter, usually not last week, to get about 14 points on the boards, maybe 17. And that's really kind of and that's kind of an allusion to maybe where I feel like this thing's going when we do a score prediction at the end of the show. But yeah, shootout. I do want to talk about your running back, Judkins. A lot of Auburn fans have familiarity with him. I think we wanted him as well. 96 carries, 581 yards, 8 total touchdowns. What do you think about him? Should we be worried about Judkins?
This is a kid that in 2 or 3 years is going to be holding a Heisman Trophy.
Ooh, love it.
He is one of the best pure freshmen. He is a true freshman, right? So at this point last year, he was sitting in home economics. And he is at or near leading the SEC in rushing as what it was supposed to be, kind of, a running back 2 or 3. He wasn't supposed to be the starter. Zach Evans coming in was supposed to be the guy. Mm-hmm. Ulysses Bentley, who came over from SMU, was supposed to be the guy. I don't think anybody had Quinshon Judkins being Ole Miss's leading rusher on their bingo sheets at this particular moment in the season. So this is a kid who is, like I said, the best true freshman running back that I can remember seeing. Even at Alabama, you typically give your true freshman running backs a season or two because they're trapped behind a bunch of studs. So I think this kid, I would not be surprised. Now, he may not end his college career with Ole Miss, but I would not be surprised at all to see him hoisting a Heisman Trophy in 2 or 3 years. He's been a fantastic surprise for us.
Oh, you guys are too nice to yourselves. Y'all got to have confidence. He'll be here when hoisting that Heisman Trophy. You're too nice, too humble about that thing. I listen. He looks like all of the talent that a lot of people hoped he might be at a young age. And when you do the things that he's doing this early in a career, it's not a far-fetched thing to say that he'll be at least contending for a Heisman Trophy. And listen, we joked earlier about the whole Auburn coaching situation, Lane being a candidate if that happens, stuff like that. Let's just assume it doesn't. He stays there through Judkins' duration with Jackson Dart. You're looking offensively at a team that could be very deadly come 1 to 2 years from now. I mean, if they all stay together in 1 year and they're doing this stuff now together, imagine what next year is going to look like. If the defense is already surprised you, I don't know what your makeup of your graduates and things like that will be next year, but I'm just kind of looking at the whole picture and seeing maybe what might happen going forward. Ole Miss is having a great year this year so far, but next year could be even better if you can keep the whole band together.
Yeah, it's a significantly younger team. I believe it's one of the younger teams in the SEC now. And to compound that with what you said, the work that Lane Kiffin does and can do in the transfer portal, right? So even if we do have deficiency somewhere, he's shown the ability to go and get guys who can come in, be automatic contributors. So yeah, absolutely. The team that this year could be significantly better next year. If Jackson Dart, again, continues kind of in that upward trajectory, Quinshon Judkins will be a true sophomore. Zach Evans, I think, will probably leave for the NFL, but Michael Trigg will be back and healthy. Most of our wide receiving core will be back. I don't think we're going to lose many people to the draft off the offense this year outside of some linemen, just because they're all pretty young, right? Not because they can't go or they can't cut it, but they're mostly, for the most part, sophomores, freshmen, not draft eligible juniors, things like that. So this team could be significantly better. And again, it feels funny saying that about a 6-0 team, but this team could be significantly better next year than they are right now.
Yeah. It's really exciting times, and keeping the band together helps out a lot. You guys can do that. This could be a very interesting story. We haven't even finished this year. We're halfway through it. And I know you talked about it earlier too, that you guys have maybe been through the easier part of your schedule. And, when we get into the SEC, it always gets a little bit tougher for everybody because you guys got Alabama coming up after us.
No, after you, I believe, is at LSU. We have Alabama November 11th.
Oh, that is later this year. Well,
November 12th.
3 weeks away, something like that. 4 weeks away.
And we get them after our bye week. So, we're going to have 2 weeks. And I am not in any universe saying that we're going to even be competitive with Alabama. But if there's a situation where you want, it's giving Lane Kiffin 2 weeks to prepare for that. This particular Alabama team, who hasn't really wowed the socks off me.
Yeah.
I've not been super impressed. And if Jalen, not Jalen Hurts.
And Milroe, how do you say his name?
If Bryce Young can't play, right, or if he's coming back at partial speed.
Yep.
Is it Jalen Milroe?
Something like that, yeah.
I think it's Milroe. He has not shown any ability to be a Superman, right? And nor should you expect it, right? He came in to sit behind the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. So, but if Alabama doesn't get some unlucky breaks, I think you could see if we roll in there at 9-0, if Alabama's coming to town at 9-0, the last time these two teams were highly ranked and met in Oxford, some goalposts came down.
They did, and that was a beautiful sight to see.
I'm not predicting that, mind you. I still think we get bushed by them, but it would not shock me. Let's say that.
Yeah, listen, we are big Ole Miss fans every time that comes around every single year, as is most of the country. It's funny, every time we get to the Iron Bowl every year, I always like tweet out the same thing. Today, we are all Auburn fans because we all know how much we all hate Alabama. And that was before Nick Saban.
We are War Eagling all day during the Iron Bowl. It is War Eagle o'clock.
All it takes, listen, if we want to get this country unified, all we got to do is just make Alabama the enemy, and we will all be on board for that. Interesting question here. It's kind of a scenario for both of us, I guess. What do you guys think if either starting quarterback gets injured, Dart or Ashford? I'll answer first. If Ashford gets hurt, we're hurt. I mean, we're down to our fourth-string true freshman Holden Geriner, who we have a lot of hope for. We've seen him in about 2 series, maybe 3 series this year already, and boy, did he look like a freshman. And that is not a knock on him. That is just simply the facts. You are a freshman in the SEC trying to survive with that offensive line. So that's my answer. What do you think happens? How does Ole Miss fare without Dart?
If we lose Dart, I think we're in significant trouble. And I don't care if we're playing Troy. I think we're in big trouble. I will say that the trouble's a little bit lessened by the propensity we've shown and the kind of the competency that we've showed being able to run the ball. But if Dart were to go down hypothetically, and heaven forbid that happens, right, Luke Altmaier, I would argue, would not play. At this point, this would be game 4. He would be wearing his red shirt. I don't think he wants to do that. I think he's transferring out at the end of the season, like I said. So at that point, we'd be down to Kincaid Dent, who's a junior. He's been in the system ever since since Lane has been here, but he hasn't really shown, outside of a couple flashes in our spring game, the ability to lead this offense down the field. And I'm not sure he's ever attempted to throw in an actual meaningful college game. So I think what you would see at that point is 8 in the box, stopping the run and forcing Kincaid Dent to make some throws that I'm not sure he can make. Right. Good kid. Love the dude. He's nothing but a team guy. I just don't think he'd be ready for really a Division I defense. So
really the question now is, what if they both go down? Who wins that battle?
I would, at that point, I'd lean Ole Miss just because, again, like I said, we can run the ball, and we're very good at running the ball.
I still would lean that way.
I think we would try and shorten the game some, maybe have Dent run, because Dent can run. He's fairly athletic, so maybe work in some option kinds of plays. But at the end of the day, I think I would go with our offensive line versus your D-line, and your D-line versus our offensive line. I think both of those probably trend Ole Miss.
Probably so. As you can tell, we're not the most optimistic fan base right now. It's really interesting, Jason, because I still get accused of being a sunshine pumper. I know you know that term, and just I'm an eternal optimist. But when you look at your offensive line and you're like, oh, that's not going to work. And it hasn't been working. You kind of have to just face it with reality and be like, unless they can get it figured out, that's really what determines our success. So for now, I guess I'm not a sunshine pumper, but I'll get the title back soon enough. Real quick, before we do some other predictions, you've talked a lot, and I will say this too. You talked about how the defense has surprised everybody this year for Ole Miss. I will echo that, because one of the good things about listening and being in the SEC teleconference every year for Coach Harsin, Lane's been right before him. So I usually check in early, and I get to hear the back end of Lane and getting him to ask that question. What's the surprising thing that's happened with the defense? Like, what's different about it?
I think mostly just being able to stop people. Yeah. Right. This was a defense that, if I'm remembering right, when Lane Kiffin came here, was statistically the worst Power 5 defense in the country. And by a far sight, right? This isn't something where we just had a couple unlucky breaks. This was, giving up 37 points to Southeast Louisiana, being in a dogfight with Southern Illinois, right? So the last year of Matt Luke, going into the first year of Lane Kiffin, this was not a good defense. So even in the COVID shortened season, not a good defense. 2021 trended a little bit better, but still not a great defense. And I think this is kind of the first year where you're starting to see that, hey, we have actual SEC depth at most of our positions. We're still a bit thin at linebacker, and that's because we've got 2 linebackers playing the NFL right now. So still a bit thin at linebacker, but we're getting better. We brought in Kyrie Robinson from TCU, who has been injured as of late, but a fantastic player. Cedric Johnson has not been, I don't think, what we wanted him to be. He kind of took over for Sam Williams after Sam Williams got drafted, but we're really stout in the secondary, right? We've got 3 deeps in the defensive backs. We've got 3 deeps at safety. In fact, the safeties, it was funny. They came out and they said, there's 2 starting spots. There's 3 of us that are really good that should start. So we decide every game who starts by doing rock, paper, scissors. So we rock, paper, scissors, and whoever wins the 2, that's who starts. But they're rotated in, and I think that does a couple different things. It gives us different looks for the offense, and it keeps us fresh, right? So It keeps it on the back end, especially if you start getting into these SEC games where you're bringing your safeties down to stop the run, things like that. They're fresher in the second half toward the end of the third, fourth quarter than the offense that they're playing against. So I think more than anything else, it's just being able to step up in the secondary, that kind of that back 7 and play with some SEC depth.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I will tell you that much. I remember how bad it was 1-2 seasons ago, not one season, but a couple seasons ago. Yeah. And that was even with the Auburn offense that probably wasn't stellar in those seasons. We kind of got to the Ole Miss game. We're like, okay, well, at least we're coming up against defense. We know they can score.
Breather, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a breather. That's not the case anymore. So with our limited time left, we'll do a score prediction, but we'll wait just a second. So everybody hold that in the comments. We're going to ask for everybody to give their score prediction. Just a couple more scenario things. We talked about, we had the question, what happens if everybody gets hurt, both quarterbacks? How about this? Auburn is very turnover prone. How many fumbles do you think Ole Miss will be able to get from Auburn? Not just cause, but recover.
Cause and recover, I will say, and again, a lot of it's going to depend on how often you have to run. I would be surprised with less than 2, right? If I were putting a line on it, I'd say 1.5.
Yeah, I honestly, I think if you said 2, that's not a far cry this year. Robbie has had a little bit of a trouble hanging on to the ball. I think, again, that comes from being young. It's understandable. It's frustrating when it happens, and with the rate of which you have. And he's not the only one. A lot of it really comes from that pressure that they're getting on their backside. It's happened to TJ. It's happened to Robbie. They're rolling out, trying to escape the pressure, and then that last guy comes in and gets him. So that's going to be your big ticket, creating pressure from the backside when he's getting ready to throw, if they can get him before he goes into the tuck rule situation, which I think benefited us once this year, but it hasn't benefited the other time.
Hasn't been kind.
It has not been kind. How many rushing yards do you think Ole Miss will get on Auburn?
Well, we're averaging as a team. Gosh, what are we averaging as a team? Give me one quick second to look here. So as a team, we are averaging 241 a game. Mm-hmm. So I would put the under on that. I think we're going to try and be a little more vertical in the passing offense. So I'd say 220.
Okay, 220. Yeah, I would say Auburn last week showing against Georgia, when you can wear them down, they will it's not that they gave up. You just it's what happens when you don't get support from the offense, right? You kind of wear down. You don't have that extra jump and edge. They will get up and be ready to meet someone in the backfield. I would say that is something that's going to be a recipe for success for Ole Miss. Don't let, and this is assuming that everybody's healthy and ready to go, Derek Hall, don't let Marcus Bragg get a whiff of blood in the water. So, and it's ironic to say with the whole land shark situation, but by the way, so you embrace the land shark thing? Is that, yeah?
Yeah, I think you kind of have to, if you know the story of the land shark, Tony Fine, who played linebacker for Ole Miss, was an Afghanistan or Iraq war vet,
right?
Originally a walk-on. He kind of brought it up, unfortunately passed away a few years after. But I think the school has kind of rallied around that frame of mind. Now, what's unfortunate is the defense hasn't been much good, right? And so it's hard to throw up a fin and be proud of being the land sharks if you're getting bushed every single week. But you're starting to see, right, guys, when they get sacks or if they make big tackles, you're starting to see that fin creep back up. And I love it. I think it's a good thing for the team to rally around.
Listen, we get made fun of all the time because we can't decide which is our mascot. Apparently, that's not the case, folks. But all that.
Yeah, are you Tigers? Are you Plainsmen? Are you War Eagles? I trust me. Every team in the SEC has the mascot, mascot conversation. For some reason, some schools get away with it.
Have you seen the guy doing the videos making fun of the mascot naming situations? He's done Auburn. He's done Alabama. I think he did Tennessee this week.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. Like
really good stuff.
Of course, it annoyed me when he pointed out the logic in the Auburn situation, but now that he's going on everybody else, I'm like, oh, this guy's brilliant.
There's no Tigers.
Tigers, War Eagles. All right, let's get to the big thing. Everybody in the chat would love, I know some of you have been doing it throughout the show, but post your final score prediction, score and winner. I will let our guest go first. Jason, if you would like to throw down a prediction.
So I know the line in Vegas opened at 16. I'm sorry, it opened at 14. It sprinted to like 16.5 Ole Miss giving. I would be shocked if it's that close. I'm not picking Ole Miss to cover. I do think they win, but I don't think they cover. I've got 31-17.
31-17. I kind of agree with your line of thinking on Auburn's scoring potential of 17 points because, like I said, we have shown a propensity to be able to score early. Now on the road's a different story. That was at home. So if you kind of take the reverse of that, when we went to our first road game, it was the opposite. We couldn't get our scoring going until late. So either way, we've shown that we can go get at least a touchdown, maybe two, especially if we can create some noise on defense. I really think Auburn's going to hold probably at 17, just the optimistic nature of me. I'm going to push it to 20 though, with another field goal. Cause I really want to continue to see our kicker Anders Carlson have a good year. So I'm going to say Auburn 20, Ole Miss. Gosh, if y'all didn't have such a good running back, that's going to, I hope not too much, but wear down our guys. I will say 35-20 Ole Miss, and that is me being super optimistic right now. I acknowledge that Auburn right now is not in a good place as a team. We do have some bright spots. Our defense, to some degree, the wide receivers have shown some promise. If we can get the wide receivers involved in this game a little bit more, we might give Robbie that little extra support that he needs to kind of make or break. So, listen, I know I sound like I'm a down in the dumps Auburn fan. I'm not. I'm hopeful. I believe they can do it. We're just looking at the context of everything that's going on here, and you guys have a lot going in your favor in this matchup.
And it's tough, as an admitted Ole Miss fan, it's tough picking Ole Miss to win this game, right? I mean, we've played 45 times. Y'all have won 35, right? So, and I think I think it's the last 6. The last time Ole Miss won was in 2017. I think it was the Laquan Treadwell comeback game. That might have been in 2015.
Yep, I remember that.
So, we have not played Auburn well at all in the past half decade. So picking Ole Miss to win with any confidence is super tough, right? That's something you typically don't want to do. It's almost like, frankly, it's like picking to beat Alabama, right? We've beaten Alabama 10 times as well. So we've beaten Auburn and Alabama the same exact amount of times. Now, obviously, we've played Auburn much less frequently than we've played Alabama, but still only 10 wins over those programs in history. You're looking at winning 10% of your games all time if you're just picking them to win one.
Right.
So I'm not super confident in my pick. And you made a great point about Anders Carlson. I think, if I had to revise it, I may say like 31-19, right? Maybe he kicks 4 field goals and Auburn scores a touchdown. Yeah. But that's still, I think I don't have any confidence. Lane Kiffin's not great at covering the spread. I think he's something like his career, one and his career at Ole Miss covering the spread. And I think that was last week. So I don't pick them to cover if you're looking for Vegas or you're looking for betting stuff, but I do pick them to win.
Yeah. I think that if you look at ESPN's predictor, it's 85% chance Ole Miss wins, and that has ticked up over the week. So we will see. The great thing is that you get to go and figure this out on the field. And it doesn't matter what the prognosticators say. It doesn't matter what weird YouTube hosts with an Auburn channel say and their guests. All that matters is you go out there on the field and play football, because it's all decided between those inches, no matter the flash, the substance, all the other, the Grove, Tiger Walk. It's all out the window when you get out there on the field.
You got to put the ball down and play the game. That's it.
Absolutely. And we're excited for another game day in, visiting the Grove for those that are out there, but in Oxford, renewing the tradition and keeping I won't call it a rivalry yet. It's not there, but we are at least divisional rivals in that sense. And so excited to have it renewed for another season. We want to obviously thank you for being here. For our people that have been watching, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us this evening. I just want to give you a couple reminders as we head out here. Do check out the links in the description. You can join the Booster Club to help keep the lights on here at E2C Network Central, or you can be a channel member. There's other ways in there that you can help support. Easiest thing you can do is smash the like button, the retweet button, wherever you're watching from, and just be a part of our little family within the Auburn family. Jason, you have been a delight, and it has been very fun. You've got me hyped for the game now.
Absolutely my pleasure, sir. If we do win, you will see the Marshall Henderson gif. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about that. It is just a contract that we have made. Every time an Auburn win happens, or a win over Auburn happens, I should say, you're going to see some jersey popping.
Oh, no.
It's nothing personal, I assure you.
Oh, no. I'm so glad that didn't come into the end of the game. So on that note, we will head out of here. Thank you, Jason, again.
My pleasure. Thank you,
everybody here hanging out with us tonight. Till we talk to you again, though, we appreciate you all being here.